Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to show you how continuous integration with GitHub, SFTX, and CircleCI is much easier than you think. My name is Mick Wheeler. I'm a software engineer at OVO Energy, the UK's largest independent energy retailer in Bristol, in the United Kingdom. If you've ever been to any Salesforce presentation ever, you've probably seen... let's go back. You've probably seen this screen before. It's a forward-looking statement just to tell you that Salesforce is a publicly listed company and not to make any purchasing decisions on anything that's not currently available. So let's get started. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve with continuous integration? Changesets are fine, right? We've used them for years. We've all been able to push code to production. So what's the drama? Well, if you've ever used Changesets, you know there is a few problems. First of all, in that changeset model, production is your source of truth. But we all know that people can change production on you. You might deploy something and somebody deploys something else over the top of it and breaks what you've done. That's not good. And you've got no safety net. So if somebody overwrites your changes and you don't have them backed up anywhere else, maybe you've written a huge feature that's now gone. That's not good. And we know that building a change set is a manual process. It's fine for a handful of components. If you've got 5 or 6, easy, 5 minutes. But what if you've got to do an entire release with hundreds of components? And then you've got to move that change set through multiple sandboxes, having to rebuild it every time. That's not good. And finally, when you've got multiple developers and admins working together, you can easily step on each other's toes. And often you'll have no idea who did what, or why, or when even, because the last modified date on the components is going to be the person who deployed them, and that's not helpful. So how do we fix this problem? With continuous integration. Continuous integration is 2 things. It's a development practice whereby you check in your code, you automatically verify your code, and you're able to find issues early. It's also a set of tools. You need source code management, like Git. You need developer tooling, like SFTX. And you need a CI pipeline or orchestration tools, like CircleCI. So let's talk a little bit more about these individual components. So source control. Some of you are probably familiar with it, and some of you maybe are using it right now. In this case, I'm talking about GitHub, but any Git source control is applicable here. When you use source control, that becomes your source of truth. Your development is no longer org-centric. It's code or configuration-centric. Your code lives in GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, and that's where the master is. Your code is safe in your GitHub repository. People can't override it. You can set up rules and options in GitHub so that nobody can make commits to your master. Think of master like production, branch. The ability to have branches lets you maintain multiple versions of your application. You can create a new branch, build a feature, have a branch for some experimental stuff that you're trying out. And everything you do in GitHub is tracked. All changes are tracked. You can roll back easily, you can see who did what, and you can see exactly what they changed line by line. So the next thing we need is some tooling. In this case, it's SFTX. SFTX is the glue that holds all of this together. Without SFTX, this would be a lot more difficult to do. SFTX is generally used by your IDE, it's used by your continuous integration tool, and you can use it yourself in your terminal. The SFTX application is scriptable, and it makes your life much easier. And finally, we need a continuous integration tool. This automates your build. It also allows you to deploy. So on the automation side, every time you make a commit to Git, it checks your code, it puts it into a Scratch org, it makes sure that your tests run, it makes sure that your components work, so you know that the code that you're going to deliver is working fine. And it's a deployment tool. So when you make that final commit to master to move your code into production, it does the same again. It pushes it to production, it checks everything, and then your code is there. So enough talking about all this. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new GitHub repository. df 2018 demo. Demo will do. So this is where we're going to store our code. GitHub helpfully gives you a nice little list of commands that you can run to set up your repository. So I'm going to do that now. I've got here the folder where my code lives. So let's pretend that this is the work I was doing pre-continuous integration. I've been using my IDE, I've got it on my local machine ready to go. So let's set it up. We're going to initialize, we're going to add all the files, we're going to commit. So this little hello is the message. This tells us what we're doing. Generally, this should be something sensible to explain the changes you've made, but for the purposes of this, hello will do. So that's added all the files. Next thing we're going to do is push these files up to GitHub by adding a remote. Once we've added that, we can then push the files to GitHub. Just need to enter my password to do so. And that's now pushed our stuff to GitHub. So if we have a little look, we can see our code is now in GitHub. And that's half the battle right there, is having a safe place for your code to live. You can see this project's got a nice little README, and in this that explains all the steps I'm going to perform today. So you can have a look at this after the fact. Now that we've got our code in GitHub, the next thing we need to do is set up SFDX. So I'll just quit VS Code and reload it, but I've got VS Code here with my project open. So let's go ahead and create a Scratch org for us to work in. I'm going to use this default definition. The definition of a Scratch org is essentially what features you have enabled, things like multi-currency, etc. So that will do. Dreamforce 2018 will do for a name. So what this is going to do is go ahead and create our Scratch org. You can see in the terminal down here that all VS Code is doing is running SFDX commands. You could easily do this yourself, but it's nice that these features are built in with the extensions. So we can see that it's successfully created our Scratch org and we're ready to do some work. The last thing we need to do is push our source code into our Scratch org so that our Scratch org looks like the code we have on our local machine. While that's running, let's recap what we did. We first created a Git repository, a place for our code to live. We pushed our code up there so that it's there and ready for us to make changes to. Finally, we created a Scratch org. This is where we're going to do our work. Think of a Scratch org as like a sandbox, but more ephemeral. Scratch orgs don't last long. Generally, you'll use it for the life of the feature that you're building, and then it will either expire or you'll get rid of it. You don't keep them around. You can create and remove them at will. It's kind of a runtime for your code more than an org. So now that we've got our Scratch org and SFDX set up, we need to set up CircleCI for our deployment pipeline. So let's pop into Chrome. Let's go into CircleCI, and I'm going to add a project. I'm going to refresh this. Now, CircleCI is connected to my GitHub account, so it's going to start pulling in repositories that are up there. You can see the repository, DF 2018 demo, that we created earlier. So I'm going to choose Setup Project. Now, the first time Circle runs, it's going to attempt to build our project. That's going to fail because we haven't finished configuring it just yet. So I'm going to let this finish what it's doing and cancel that first build, and I'll explain how we configure CircleCI. Just give this a moment. So I'll press Start Building here, and then instantly cancel that once it shows up. There we go. So let's go ahead and cancel that build. So CircleCI relies on two things. A configuration file. Now, I've written this one in advance because typing this out in 20 minutes would take up the entire demo. But I'm going to explain what we do. We've got two steps. The first one is build. So every time you make a change and you commit it to Git, it runs this step. It's going to pull the source code in. It's going to push it into your Scratch org. It's going to run all your tests to make sure that what you've done works. The next step that we've got is deploy prod. It does what it sounds like. So if we make a commit to the master branch, it's going to run this set of steps. pull the code, set up the connection, and deploy to production. Our workflows down here tell Circle what to do when it comes to various branches. Our build one knows to ignore commits to master, and our deploy prod knows to only listen to commits to master. Once again, our master branch is going to be what's in production. So let's flick back to Circle and set up the environment variables for this project. So we'll go to Settings, Environment Variables. Now, environment variables are where we store our secure information that we don't want in our GitHub repository, our secrets, our ways to get into Salesforce. If we were to store these in our Git repository, and that was to get compromised, well, people could get into your org, and you don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and add 3 environment variables to make this all work. Another note here is the way CircleCI connects to Salesforce is via a connected app. So I've already set this connected app as they take up to 10 minutes to provision. This one's ready to go. What we need from this is our consumer key. And we also need to note that this connected app has a certificate. Now, on the subject of certificates, I've got a nice little script here that will generate all of this for you. This is in the GitHub repo, and this will be available to everybody after this. So what this does is steps us through what we need to do to generate a certificate. So I'm just going to step through here, put in some information. That's all we need for our certificate to work, and that's going to generate the certificate. This big long string here is what we need to put as one of our environment variables. So I've got our environment variables here that I've already set up, so let's put them into Circle. So our big long certificate, that's our first one. Scroll all the way back. Our client ID. This is the next one. Now this is probably the most difficult part of this entire process. So once you've got this done, everything becomes very easy. Let's just get our username. So this is the user we want Circle to run as. In this case, it's just my normal login. So we've done that now, and we can go back to our project or our list of jobs, and if Circle would like to load, we can rerun this. So what did we do here? I know that was quite a lot to take in. We created a new CircleCI build. We told Circle what we want it to do and how to get into Salesforce with all that environment variables and secret stuff. With the configuration file, we told it what we want it to do when we commit to master, how to push to production, and what we want it to do when we commit to any other branch. So finally, let's actually write some code and see how this all works. So I'm going to switch back to VS Code, and I'm going to make a little change here to our Lightning component. So if we just quickly look in production, refresh this. This is our production org. Where are we? And we can see it currently says hello from Dreamforce. That will change once it finishes doing this initial build, because this initial build is deploying to production. It's just currently installing our dependencies. Our dependencies in this case is SFDX. So we'll wait for that to finish, but I'll make a small change here. Hello from DF 2018. So what we need to do, before we can do anything else really, is create a nice new branch for our work to go in. I haven't saved this yet. So we've got our new branch, we've made our change, we'll save this, and we'll push this up to Git. So we're going to do a commit. We're going to say what we did. We're going to push this up to Git. It's going to tell us that this branch doesn't yet exist, so we're going to create it. And we enter our password again. And once that's done, if we have a look at, and we can also see while we're waiting, our initial deployment has worked. And this should now say hello world, what we had before. So let's look at our repo, our repository in Git. And we can see here's my branch that I just created. I'm going to create what's called a pull request, which is essentially an opportunity to review the code, have any automations run, such as a circle build, and merge the code into master, which means essentially deploy it to prod. So let's create this pull request. Now, pull requests are very powerful. Pull requests let you perform code reviews, which is something you all should be doing. Pull requests also let you have integrations to other systems, like Circle. They let you review the things that you've changed before you go ahead and make that commit. So we can see here, this is what we've changed. We've changed from hello world to hello from DF 2018. Obviously, every single file would be listed here that we had changed. We can have a little conversation with our coworkers about this if we need to discuss the code that we've changed, which in big things, big commits, big releases, we would. And we can see what Circle's up to. So just going to pop Circle open into a new tab. And we can see that we've set everything up and we're creating our Scratch org ready to make sure our code works properly. That will take just a moment. And once that's done, it will start validating our code and running all of our tests. If Circle would like to hurry up and do its thing, come on. Let's just wait for that. Come on, Circle. You can do it. Just refresh the page. OK, while we're waiting for Circle to create its Scratch org, I'll briefly show you one other thing from the config file that I glossed over. These commands are essentially shell scripts. They can be any old Linux command, but it's easier if you have a shell script explaining what you're doing. So for example, our deployment to production, you can see all the commands that we run to do that. Setting up production, you can see all the commands that we run to do that, and so on and so forth. Let's just check on Circle. Nope, it's still taking its time. And this one is our simple install script. It's literally one command, but it's nice and easy to explain in a shell script. So, while we're waiting, I'm going to go ahead and merge this anyway. Now, normally you wouldn't do this because we want to know that everything's passed, but considering we've changed one thing, I'm sure it's fine. So, let's merge this pull request. Now, upon doing this, I've committed to master, and I've started another build inside of Circle. So if we go and look at our jobs, we can see that both of these are now running. So this is our production build. It's going and installing our dependencies, as we've seen before. It's going to authenticate to production, and it's going to deploy our code. We'll just close this one. So let's just see how we're going. There we go. That one's been successful. You can see it validated, added all of our changes. And you can see it ran all of our tests. We only have the one in this case. It showed us how long it took. So let's go back. We can see our other build is running. We're still installing dependencies, so this can take just a moment. Once this is done, it's going, as I said before, it's going to deploy to production. So we'll just let this run. There we go. We're logging into production. Hopefully this is a little quicker than our Scratch org. There we go. And now we're deploying to production. So as soon as this is done, I'm going to be able to see, here we go, it's in progress, the changes that I've made. There we go. That was successful. Let's go and look at our little Lightning component. We can see that it says hello from DF 2018. So what was the point of all this? CI is not as hard as you think. I set this up start to finish in about 20 minutes. If you commit a day to this, you can make your build process much faster and much easier. Basic CI tools are free and easy. CircleCI has a free tier. GitHub has a free tier. You can get started without spending any money. Try it out. So thank you so much for coming along. If you've got any questions, please come up and see me afterwards. I've got two last things to mention. Make sure you book a seat for the developer keynote on Thursday at 1 o'clock in Moscone West. And finally, all of the information and the Git repository that I have built here are available on GitHub to help you out. You can scan this QR code or go to micwheels.net/Dreamforce to get further information. Thank you so much for coming along, and I hope this helped you out.